Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going tonight?
It's good. Feels like we've been putting a lot of time in the recording studio here the last week or so, but we're back to our usual Thursday night, Friday morning release, I guess, for this week.
Yeah, this is our third episode in 5 days or 6 days. We had a double, a twofer, so to speak, that we released on, I believe it was Monday, Tuesday, to preview the League One Alberta season. Kudos to you for getting so many interviews with the head coaches of Calgary's various League One teams in the can. I'd encourage people to listen to those episodes that we released a few days ago if you're interested in League One. Bit of a shift in topic tonight. We're going to return to talking a lot about Cavalry, but as per usual, we have a lot of topics on the go that we get to discuss.
Definitely. And if you are a new listener, Scott, can you tell us what the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about?
We focus on soccer in Calgary. We talk about it at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional levels. We often interview players, coaches, team owners, anybody involved with the soccer scene in Calgary.
As you mentioned, we're going to have quite a bit of focus, at least off the start here with Cavalry. We're going to talk about their last couple matches, the match against the Whitecaps and the match against Vancouver FC. We'll also do a preview of the upcoming match in Halifax on Saturday. Then I think we're going to segue into an interview. Scott, who is our guest this week for the podcast?
So a few days ago, we interviewed Lleyton Brooks. He is, of course, a new signing with Cavalry this season. He joined Cavalry from Melbourne Victory in the A-League in Australia. He'd also played for the Brisbane Roar. So he's one of Cavalry's international players this season. He's been playing mostly on the wing. So we caught up with him and talked about his first handful of matches for the team.
We'll get to that interview in a little bit. We're also going to talk about the neutral site game that Cavalry is going to be involved in June in Kelowna. Also some updates regarding Mya Jones, League One, and also Project 8.
Yeah, so a pretty packed agenda, so to speak, for this episode. I'm excited to dive into these things.
Why don't we start off with the match from earlier this week, Canadian Championship match against Whitecaps over at Spruce Meadows on a very rainy, miserable evening. That match, it was a 2-1 loss for Cavalry. Scott, you were there. Why don't you sort of take the lead and talk about what you saw?
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting game, I thought. The beginning, you could really tell that Cavalry was focused on its defensive shape. I thought their defending was really disciplined, the way that they were pressing in packs and holding their lines, not really giving the Whitecaps anything. It was a very cagey first 46 minutes. I referred to it in my game recap as a battle of attrition in the midfield. And that was really reflected in the statistics, which highlighted that Cavalry produced a 0.06 XG and the Whitecaps produced a 0.04 XG. And they only managed one shot on target in the first half, but what a shot it was, because right on the cusp of halftime, Cavalry gave away a free kick in the Whitecaps' end, and they took it quickly with a long ball forward. Callum Montgomery got his head on it to kind of half clear it, but it fell to Levante Johnson, who was making his starting debut for the Whitecaps, and he kind of belted it from 25 plus yards out, sailed into Marco Carducci's top corner, flipping in off the post. Wonderful goal for the Whitecaps. Almost the last kick of the half. So that really changed the complexion for the second half when the teams came back out.
So yeah, I thought right before the goal, they were going to go into the dressing rooms at halftime, and I thought Cavalry was going to be pretty happy with themselves because they really did play a nice, disciplined first half. But yeah, that was a brilliant goal. I don't know what else to really say. You can't argue with the quality on that.
No, not at all. And the second half, that goal really did open things up because both teams were a lot more adventurous, I found, in the second half. Whitecaps almost made it 2-0 pretty quickly. And Ali Ahmed, the Canadian international, he hit a shot off the crossbar. Cavalry had a decent chance from Lleyton Brooks, who got his head on the end of a a Fraser aired cross that Isaac Boehmer had to save. Looked like it was a 1-0 game, and then Levante Johnson actually doubled his tally with another goal, a lot less nice than his first one, but actually a similar play. Long ball pumped forward, route one by the Whitecaps. Montgomery on this one wasn't able to clear it, and Johnson was there to pick up the pieces and slot a shot past Marco Carducci to make it 2-0.
Right near the end, the Cavs were able to pull one back. I thought it was a nice play by Lucas Diaz. I thought he played only a handful of minutes in that match, but I think some of his best touches were in that match. He slid a nice through ball into Malcolm Shaw, and then he was able to, on kind of a crazy angle, get it in. What do you think of that goal, Scott? I was a bit surprised at it just because of the angle and everything like that. What was your thought?
Lucas Diaz played a great pass. I think he split 3 Vancouver defenders or something. Malcolm Shaw made a good run. And it was a really tight angle, but he managed to hook his foot around it, and it kind of trickled in the far post. But great for him, right? He's been knocking on the door trying to score his first goal for Cavalry in the last, all season really. And it's great for him to get that monkey off his back. But it's also great for Lucas Diaz, who I know we've talked about in recent episodes. He hasn't quite looked settled yet. And an assist like that in an important match and an important moment is probably going to do wonders for his confidence.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's a situation there where I don't think anyone's questioning his technical ability or skill. It's just being able to sort of have that confidence and make plays on the pitch, and that was a really, really positive sign, I thought. So and Malcolm Shaw, he's appeared in basically every match, and he's been close a few times. And when you're a striker, I think you always, the reason you're out there is to put the ball in the back of the net. So until you really do that, I think that it probably plays tricks on your mind until you do. So it was nice to see him open his account for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it's an important goal too, because heading to BC Place down 2-0 on aggregate is a pretty daunting task. That's a pretty daunting deficit to overcome. 2-1 makes it seem a little bit more possible. They still need to score 2 because of the away goals rule, but I feel like just getting that goal back, pulling 1 back is going to do a lot for Cavalry's confidence heading into what will surely be a very difficult match when they take on Vancouver on May 21st.
Yeah, I think if it would have been 2-0, that would have been virtually impossible. This is still a pretty big hill to climb, but at least I think you could make an argument that it could happen. It's plausible, and you can, you have to score 2 goals in BC Place. We got a couple weeks, and we'll see how the second half of that tie goes.
Yeah, and Tommy Wheeldon Jr. pointed out in the press conference when asked about this, he said, "Look, we've scored 2 goals at BC Place before, so we know it's possible," and that's a great point. I think this is a stronger looking Whitecaps than that 2019 team was. Obviously, they were able to score 1 at home, so they know they can do it. So kudos to Cavalry for staying in the contest, and I'm very interested to see how Leg 2 goes in a couple of weeks.
Let's talk about the other match that happened this week, and it was on Friday night, so almost a week ago. And Vancouver FC came to town, and that game was a fair bit different than the Whitecaps game. It ended up with being a 3-1 victory for Cavalry.
Yeah, this was, in my opinion, the best Cavalry has played this season. It was the first time really where I felt they put a complete performance together. They were winning 3-0. They let one slip, I think, pretty late in the game, but good performance from Tobias Warshevsky, who got a double, scored another header at the back post, and then got a penalty kick in the second half. I think I buried the lead there because the best goal of the game came from Charlie Trafford. Yeah, that was a Lionel Messi-esque goal, which is how One Soccer described it. But he picked up the ball pretty much in the center circle and, shook off a couple of Vancouver defenders, took maybe 5 or 6 touches, got into Vancouver's box and then left-footed it into the bottom right corner. Very, very nice. And I believe that's his first goal for Cavalry.
Because that is not what you expect from Charlie Trafford out there. And all his touches were just perfect. Like, and I don't think he's naturally left-footed either. It was just the touch was superb. And I don't think any of the experienced strikers on the club could have done better. It was pretty surprising for sure, but in a good way.
Yeah, I was watching Charlie kind of carefully that game because I noticed right from the first minute that he was having a really good game. His role for Cavalry is to be a deep lying central midfielder, to be that kind of pivot player, the anchor. And he was doing that. He was showing for every ball when the defense had it. He was, spraying very accurate long balls out to the wings. He was winning tackles in 50-50s. So he was playing very well. And I think he just, something in his brain when he got that ball told him, he's like, look, I'm playing really well. I should just head forward and see how this goes. And I think maybe the Vancouver players weren't expecting that from him because he usually stays pretty deep on the pitch, but he had an opening and he took it. So kudos to Trafford for scoring a great goal. And obviously he was chosen as the player to do the press conference after and asked about his goal. He's like, I don't know. I think I blacked out. Don't even remember it.
It did get a little bit nervy there at the end. It did seem like maybe they lost their focus a little bit, but it only cost them the one goal. And I don't think the game was ever in doubt, but it did seem like they took their foot off the throat there for the last little bit. But overall, can't argue with that performance. It was easily their best performance of the season. And yeah, not a lot to be critical of for sure.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see how they do in Halifax this Saturday because they have had some struggles out east. It is a very long road trip, obviously. Tough place to play, I think. Wanderers ground is obviously, one of the best atmospheres in the CPL. But when you're the visiting team, that's not going to help you. But Halifax has really struggled this season so far, and they've been knocked out of the cup by a semi-pro side, by a League One side. So their confidence is probably shot. But at the same time, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has talked about when you take on a team like that, they could be like a wounded animal. You don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, I think the wounded animal comment is right on the money because if you look at it, you're playing in their stadium. Cavs just had a short week against an MLS opponent, and they're a bit banged up. They have a few players. We don't really know what their status is right now. So if I was the coach of the Wanderers, I would be like, this is a tough team we're playing, but maybe we're going to get them in a weak spot and let's go for it. It's not going to be easy. It's never easy going out to Halifax, but I think, yeah, this one could be, I would expect that whole wounded animal thing to be very apt for Halifax this week.
They were a strong team last year, I feel, and I feel like they have a stronger roster and they have the same coach. Some of their stars are still there. Their most important players, like Daniel Nimick, I believe, is still on the Wanderers. So all the pieces are there. It just hasn't come together yet for them. But I do see them as a team that is going to pick up their performances at some point. It's just a matter of, is that point going to be this weekend?
Exactly. Okay, let's move on and talk about our interview with Lleyton Brooks. So as you mentioned earlier, Scott, we had a chance to speak with him earlier this week. And nice conversation about what it's like to come from Australia and join up with a team here in Canada.
Yeah, Lleyton, the interview really revealed that he put a lot of thought into the decision to come to Canada. He mentioned, even following the league last year. So it was definitely something that was on his mind. He's not the only Australian on Cavalry, right? There's Jesse Daly. And I assumed that because they'd actually played for the same team in the A-League that, Jesse Daly must have convinced him to come out and play in the CPL. But as Lleyton described it, that's not exactly how it went. I'll kind of let Lleyton speak for himself. But yeah, very, very interesting. I think the revelation that he played with Luis Nani, the former Manchester United and Portugal star who has won a Champions League, that was really cool. I liked hearing him talk about what it was like to be his teammate.
Okay, let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Lleyton Brooks to the podcast. Lleyton has joined Cavalry FC this year, and we're glad to have him join the podcast. Hi, Lleyton. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I thought we'd start off by maybe asking you a couple details about sort of your background and career thus far, and how you ended up coming to Canada to play soccer.
Yeah, so I'm Australian, well, half Australian, half Japanese. I grew up in Australia playing football from a very young age and made my way over to Canada this year. My pathway was pretty similar to Jesse Daly, I'd say, another Aussie in our team. Yeah, so pretty much I started off as playing at the age of around 3 or 4 years old, just copying my brother pretty much, who's 2 years older than me. And I just carried on playing up until around, I reckon I was 11 years old, and I started taking football a bit more seriously, started making some teams, like I was trying out for some teams just for a bit of fun, just to, see how far I could take it. And I just kept making these teams, and it kind of just escalated from there, going from the QAS at under 15s, which is a Queensland Academy of Sport, and then Brisbane Raw at under 16s. And then when I went to, at the age of 17, I went to Canberra at the Australian Institute of Sport, so where like all the elite athletes all over Australia go, the Olympians and the Paralympians and etc. They all go there, and I was living there for about a year. Came back to Brisbane, played at Brisbane Roar Youth for about a year and a half, and then made my way over to Melbourne. And then when I went to Melbourne, I played for the Melbourne Victory Youth team and built my way into the first team, had my debut in, I think it was 2020. Yeah, ever since then, been playing professional.
I know you mentioned Jesse Daly. I was curious if you had a lot of conversations with him prior to deciding to come to Canada to try out the CPL.
Yeah, no, so I didn't. I wasn't really. I knew Jesse just throughout the football community in Australia, as you do, and obviously he played at Brisbane Roar as well. But he's a couple years older than me, so we he was playing there while I was in Canberra, and then when I came back, he left. I think he went to Seattle at that time. And then when I left Brisbane to go to Melbourne, he came back to Brisbane. So we kind of missed each other. I didn't speak to him before coming to Canada, no. Just only a couple things after I signed, that's all.
What made you decide to make such a, big move across seas to continue your career here?
Yeah, so I think the Canadian Premier League's a new league. I think in Australia, I was arguably saying I was probably at the biggest club in Australia. So as being the biggest club in Australia, they were signing some very big players in my position, being an attacker. And it was pretty hard to get starting minutes in that team. I kind of looked to, I'd say a smaller league, a more new developing league, to kind of get some exposure and a lot more game time to then, boost my career further. That was kind of the idea. And I think CPL was standing out to me coming from, the World Cup's coming in 2026. I think there'd be a lot of development throughout the league. And I've known a couple of players who played here before, and they're pretty happy and they enjoyed it. So I thought, why not,
So Lleyton, you've played, I think, about half the teams in the CPL so far. I'm curious what your impressions are of the league as a whole in terms of style of play as well as the level of competition.
Yeah, I think, good question. The league's very different to Australia, I'd say. I think physically, in regards to running wise and, just keeping up with the game, Australia's been a lot more tough. Whereas I think here it's a lot more technical, where there's a lot more touches on the ball. They're playing a lot. I think the style of play is very different, which has made me adapt a bit different to Canada. So with Australia, I felt it was a bit more slow paced, where they would move it side to side, just be patient. I think here it's transitional at times, but I'd say it's a lot more creative. That's what I'd say.
So one thing for you coming from Australia and playing in the A-League, some of the players that come to Canada and they're playing in the CPL are very shocked at the traveling and the distances between. You probably have a little bit more of familiarity with that because there's some pretty significant distances in Australia, isn't there?
Yeah, so with Australia, I think the furthest flight would probably be 4 hours. So I think for us here in Calgary, going to Halifax is the furthest for us. I think that's 5. So here there is a lot of travel here, obviously going to Toronto, Ottawa, Halifax, they're pretty like 4 or 5 hour flights, which is not really what I'm used to that much. Whereas in Australia, there's maybe 2 4 hour flights in the year, and then maybe New Zealand, which is about 3 hour flight from Melbourne, and everything else is about 2 to 1 hour. But yeah, it's a lot more travel than I'd say in Europe and other countries.
Yeah, we've definitely heard that with the people we've interviewed, Lleyton. Next question for you is kind of your thoughts on the team that you've joined and how it's been to integrate into the Cavalry setup, considering that there was a lot of continuation from last year's roster, right? So what has it been like to join this team, and how do you feel you've integrated with your new teammates?
Yeah, I think at the start it was a bit tough at the start, adapting to the new system. Like obviously being in a different country, a new league, they have a very different playing style to what I'm used to. The teammates around me, they've really helped me, let me know where I need to be at what positions in the game. And I think adapting to the turf was probably the hardest thing for me. I've never really played on turf ever in Australia, definitely not in a professional game. So adapting to turf, like being in Calgary, coming here in January, it was very cold and snowing, so we couldn't train outside. So we were training indoors, and that was just it was difficult for me to try and adjust to that. But team wise, I feel like I'm a very adaptable player, so I think changing the system and learning new things is pretty easy for me. And yeah, definitely the boys and the coaches helped out a lot, and it was
What are your expectations for yourself in terms of performance and contribution to the team this year?
Yeah, I've set some high goals for myself this season. Being in Australia, I didn't get as much game time as I wanted to, and I think I set a goal for me on obviously not being fed minutes in this team just given out easily. You have to work for them. Obviously, competing with Moosey and Willie and Toby now, and it's a very competitive position to be in. And obviously, we're all teammates at the end of the day, but everyone's trying to train harder than each other to be in that starting 11. And I think for me, just getting as many minutes as I can possible this season will really help me out in my development. In terms of goals and assists, yeah, I've set a benchmark for myself. Probably won't mention to you guys what that benchmark is, but we'll see at the end of the season if I meet that. And yeah, I think at this stage, looking at the league and looking at my performances and how I feel on the pitch, I think I can achieve that. So
My last question for you was going to be about Cavalry's depth in offense. That's been a talking point this season, but I think you touched on it. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about coming to Canada, CPL, or Cavalry in general before we end the interview?
did you say about the offense at the start of that?
Yeah, the attacking depth of Cavalry and just the number of strikers and wingers the team has this year.
Previously, like coming into this team, I had a look at the players that were in this squad, and obviously I was watching a bit towards the end of last season, and Moosey getting that award at the end of the year, showing how good he is as a player, and Willie coming in halfway through, scoring a couple goals, making a good impact in the team. Was me looking at that was a good challenge, and a realistic challenge. Whereas I think with my last club, I had players like Lewis Nanny in front of me, where I think it was kind of an impossible task for me to get into that starting 11 with him there. No, I think coming in, before coming to Canada, looking at that, I thought these two will, push me to a good level where we all three of us can compete and, like make each other better. So.
Well, before we end, I do want to ask about Lewis Nanny, because he's at Melbourne Victory a few years ago. Hey, so that was when you were there.
So.
Oh yeah, that's quite the teammate to have. What was he like in terms, like, did he get on with the team? Did you learn from him? Or?
Yeah, I learned quite a bit from him. He was very good, as a teammate. Kind of like teaching the younger boys a lot of things, even teaching the older boys, what positioning we should be in, how to control like the game a lot better, and just bringing his obviously amazing career and giving us some experiences from that and helping us, through the season. For me personally, like he gave me a lot of tips on, obviously being as an attacker, striking the ball, crossing the ball, when to be in what position at what time, and I think I learned a lot from him.
No, yeah, I just had to throw that last one in. That was
absolutely,
Lleyton.
Okay, well, thanks very much for taking the time to do the interview, Lleyton, and we wish you all the best in the upcoming season. We'll be following along, and I hope you get a chance to achieve your goals, and welcome to Canada. I know you've been here for a bit, but still welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks very much to Lleyton Brooks for taking the time to do the interview. And we'll definitely be watching his progress. He's really started to come on in the last couple games and get more time. And you can just see that he's been getting real close with, really breaking out. So I think we're going to see him on the score sheet a fair bit over the summer.
I do too. I was wondering because he hinted at he has his metrics in mind that he wants to reach. And I feel like he's going to chip in with more than 5 goals this season. And I assume more than 5 assists as well. He's very dynamic on the ball. He's very fast. And we've seen him take free kicks. We've seen him get on the end of crosses. So I do think that he has a lot in his locker. And I'm excited to see how he does this season.
Last topic this week for Cavalry. News came out at the end of this week that one of the upcoming matches that Cavalry is going to be playing in the middle of June. It was supposed to be a Vancouver FC home game in Vancouver, but the match has now been moved. It's going to be, technically still a Vancouver FC home game, but it's on a neutral site. It's going to be at the Apple Bowl in Kelowna.
Yeah, and you did some sleuthing before this announcement came out, so you kind of ruined the CPL's announcement, I think. Kudos to you, Jason. You went on Ticketmaster and saw that the game was taking place there. Can you kind of talk about what led you to that revelation?
Well, it's almost one of these things I don't even really want to talk about it because it's so dumb and easy that it will just, people would just say, really? That's what happened? But I knew that if there's going to be a neutral site game in Kelowna, there's only one place it could be played at, and that's the Apple Bowl in Kelowna. So I just went to the Ticketmaster website and I typed in locations to look for tickets, and I typed in Kelowna and Apple Bowl came up, and I clicked on it and there it was. So like I said, it wasn't exactly some super genius sleuthing. It was just, putting 2 and 2 together and actually going to the Ticketmaster website. And then I tweeted it out with a screenshot, and then within minutes, I think maybe half an hour or so, it was taken off. But
yeah, that was pretty cool to see. I know you it went a little bit viral in the Canadian soccer world, so that was cool. The good press for the YYC Soccer podcast, making it onto a Northern Tribune article. But that's an intriguing prospect. What do you think about the idea of a CPL game in Kelowna and of the eventuality of a team in Kelowna?
I could talk about this sort of stuff all day. So, and I know that I know the name of this podcast is the YYC Soccer Podcast, so I'm not going to turn it into the CPL expansion podcast. But I think Kelowna makes a lot of sense. It's not a huge market, but it's probably big enough, and they don't really have any major league sports and of any sort. They have WHL hockey in the wintertime, but in the summertime, there's not much to speak of. So it's kind of a market that they would go in there, and there's not a lot of competition. And there's definitely a history of soccer being played there. They have actually in the past even had some national team matches in the very distant past at the Apple Bowl. I think there were maybe there were U20 matches, but the Apple Bowl is woefully insufficient as it currently stands to be a CPL stadium. But it wouldn't take much, I don't think. That stadium, basically, it's got a grandstand that has a roof on it, and I don't know, it holds 1,000. It's small. And then across on the other side, they've got a bunch of, they look like temporary bleachers, but I guess they're not temporary. They've been there forever. And I think that's another 1,000, 1,300 seats there. So that's it. Right now, as it stands, it's a little bit over 2,000 seats. Now, obviously, they can bring in some more to circle the field for this match, but they would need more than that if it was to turn into a CPL venue. But I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I like the idea of Kelowna as an expansion city simply because it's a feasible road trip for Cavalry supporters and media. I think since the dissolution of FC Edmonton, I haven't been to any CPL games outside of Spruce Meadows. I don't think the Kelowna game is going to be feasible for me this year, unfortunately, just because of other commitments I have that weekend. I think like the long-term prospect of a road trip out to Kelowna, maybe stay the night, that's really exciting to me. And I honestly and obviously hope to see it come to fruition at some point. I'm not sure if Kelowna is big enough of a market. I think it has 200,000 people, but I might be off. However, other places aren't that far away. So it could be a regional team if you think about Vernon and Penticton and maybe a few other smaller towns and cities within like an hour or so radius. But yeah, obviously, I mean, I'm excited to see what the turnout for that June 16th game is going to be.
Tickets went on sale here, so I don't know. We'll see what the numbers look like, and I think it could be really interesting. And I guess we'll see. I think one thing that could really help them is if they are a big fish in a small pond, they're going to get more oxygen, right? Like, if they had a CPL team in Kelowna, it would be a big deal in the summertime. It would be a thing. People would know what it is, and it would have a large level of awareness. And, I think right now, one of the things the CPL lacks a little bit is in some of the bigger markets, like, the level of awareness probably isn't, it could be better, but in a place like Kelowna, everybody would know about who this team is right away, I think.
Well, we've seen that with Halifax. And I know that a big reason I think Halifax's fan base is so strong is their centrality in the city. It's very close to the core. I did just look up where Apple Bowl Stadium is. It doesn't look like walking distance from Kelowna city center, but not a long drive, right? So
I've actually been to the Apple Bowl. I went and checked it out really briefly because at the time, one of my wife's family members was actually playing for the Okanagan Sun football team. Yeah. And they weren't practicing, but I wanted to go check out the Apple Bowl when we were in Kelowna, and we were just not far away from it. So I just drove up and saw it. So it's not far away from all the downtown action, but it is kind of, the best way to describe it from what I remember is it's kind of almost like a Shoaldice Park scenario. It's like, it's not far from the downtown, but it's this huge sort of athletic complex where there's a track around there. There's like a whole bunch of baseball fields and soccer and football fields, and I think tennis courts. It's just this huge athletic complex setup. So I think it's sort of well known as being sort of the athletic hub of the city.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know they've hosted, I think, national track and field championships, maybe not full-fledged senior track and field, but U20 or U18, like junior, for instance. And you mentioned the Okanagan Sun. I know that's a pretty popular and successful junior football team. So, yeah, but I think you're right in the sense that, Kelowna doesn't have pro sports the same way Halifax didn't have pro sports. The same way Saskatchewan Roughriders are popular in Regina and throughout Saskatchewan, right? They're the only pro sports team in town or in the province. So you see that like that popularity factor or that novelty factor really contribute to the popularity of CPL teams in certain markets.
Let's change the subject entirely and talk about Mya Jones. So a couple weeks ago, on the podcast, we were talking about how she had not appeared on the pitch yet for the San Diego Wave. But, what happened just like a day after I think we released our podcast, Scott? I think someone in the Wave front office must have been listening to us.
Yeah, because she made her debut on April 27th. Starting the match. It was a 2-1 victory over Bay FC. She played 69 minutes. Must have played quite well because she got back onto the pitch just over a week later, May 5th, subbed in, albeit not a lot of playing time. She got subbed in at the end of the match in injury time. But on May 8th, so just yesterday, Wednesday, she got the start and played just over an hour. So she went from not playing at all in the first half dozen games of the season for the San Diego Wave, and now she's played 3 games almost back to back, it seems.
It's great to see. I think we've been following along with her, and it seemed like it was inevitable she was going to get on the pitch. But it's nice to finally see her get out there, and congrats to her. And yeah, we're continuing to watch and see what happens. But yeah, it's nice to see.
Yeah, and I just wanted to check the NWSL standings, and San Diego Wave surprisingly kind of mired in mid-table at the moment. They have a 3-1-3 record, so 10 points after 7 matches. So hopefully she can help the team kind of pick things up and get back towards the top of the table.
We also just wanted to mention League One season did start on Tuesday night, and the first matches, I believe they were running right up against the Cavalry game, but the Foothills and Callies United on both men's and women's sides played in a doubleheader, and over the course of both matches, I believe no goals were scored. It was 0-0 in both matches. So there are 3 doubleheaders today on Friday. Blizzard are taking on Edmonton BTB, and Foothills are taking on St. Albert Impact. And then in the third doubleheader, it's Edmonton Scottish against the combo of Cavalry FC U21s, and on the women's side, the National Development Center.
So we have one more topic we'd like to talk about, which was something that was teased on social media recently. Big announcement coming up regarding Calgary's Project 8 franchise on May 30th. Jason, what do you know about that?
I know about as much as you do. They're teasing something, so I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say it's going to be some kind of branding of some sort. Like we know about 3 other teams. We know about the Whitecaps and the Toronto team and the Halifax team. And we know there's a couple other teams that are supposed to be announced, but nobody has started ticket deposits. Nobody has announced stadiums. There's been not a lot announced at this point. So I guess we're going to see whatever Foothills announces on the 30th. It's going to be more than we've seen for any of the other teams thus far. So yeah, it could be many things, I guess, but I would think if nothing else, it's going to be some kind of branding information. If are they going to slightly alter the name, or are they going to, that would be my guess.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how, what Foothills on the women's side will look like once they have a pro club. I think obviously the best players from their Foothills WFC UWS team will be moving up to that side, but I'm sure they'll be recruiting from abroad as well. And then, there's League One to think about. So there's going to be a very interesting pipeline at the senior level for women in Calgary come next year.
Definitely. And we have to really see what next season looks like. I have a few theories about how this could all play out next year. And I'm not really sure exactly the nature of the competition and of the season, the length of the season and everything like that. But I think whatever form it takes, it's going to be a step forward in women's soccer in this country. So I think that's positive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that'll probably do it for this episode. I know we're hoping to focus on Foothills WFC next week. Their season is fast approaching. They've started to announce their signings for 2024. So I know that's going to be coming up. But anything else you'd like to add, Jason, before we sign off for the night?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered a lot of things as usual, and there'll be more to talk about next week for sure. And yeah, thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or most of the other ones that you're familiar with. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com for more information about us and how to leave a question or comment. You can follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.